Champlain Towers South fell in June of 2021. And you called me on my cell and you said, Robert, we have to do something about this. And that phone call triggered a lot of thinking in my mind. And all of a sudden I realized our entire industry is built on the heavy load that board members all across the country are carrying. We have to do something about this, and I'm in.
Common Sense for Common Areas exists to help all 2 million volunteer board members nationwide have the right information at the right time to make the right decisions for their future. This podcast is sponsored by 4 companies that care about board members: Association Insights and Marketplace, Association Reserves, Community Financials, and Kevin Davis Insurance Services. You'll find links to their websites and social media in the show notes.
Hi, I'm Robert Nordlund from Association Reserves.
And I'm Kevin Davis of Kevin Davis Insurance Services, and this is Common Sense
for Common Areas. Today is episode number 1, and we're going to spend a little bit of time introducing each other here and the why behind this podcast.
Thanks, Robert. I've been thinking, it's been 40 years ago since I insured my first community association. And it's funny because before that, I've been in insurance for about 5 years, young, 20-something-year-old guy. And I got a call from somebody who said, do you know anything about condominiums? And as a sales guy, young, I said, sure, I know all about condominiums.
Absolutely.
And that was my first condominium D&O. I've been handling director's office liability for over 40 years, but condominiums, 40 years ago, I had looked at one. And since then, it's been all I've been doing is community associations, insuring them for directors and officers liability, for acts of them doing something a wrongful act policy. So I'm watching over these board members and seeing things they've been doing that really, really has impacted me to the point is that's pretty much why I'm here today.
What got you interested in the D&O section? It sounded like you'd been doing 5 years of insurance before then. What attracted you to the community association side of things?
Well, it's interesting because I was in Los Angeles and I was handling D&O for the major corporations. I was handling Disney. I was handling Hilton Hotel corporations. I was handling some of the top Fortune 500. And when he called me up and said he had a D&O for condos, my instinct was right off the bat was to do it. Well, everybody would have said no. How can you go to writing these big corporations?
I think
one thing.
Yeah, that's the wrong career trajectory, Kevin.
It's the wrong career trajectory. But right then, I do everything. It's like they put something in front of me. I want to be the expert at it. But the interesting thing about it all was that it was a lot of work to handle these multi-million-dollar corporations. I mean, the applications and visiting. But boy, I was handling condos 10, 15 at a time. And it was just the work wasn't that much. And back then, it was all theory. There were no claims. Nobody sued anybody. Nobody got any trouble, And so it was simple and easy. And all of a sudden, it was like, you know what? I think I like this business, this condo business. And I transitioned about 4 or 5 years later. So about the past 35 years, exclusively handling community associations, directors and officers looking out for the board members to make sure they make better, more informed decisions.
I like that. So you found something, you realized you were good at it, you felt good doing it, it was easy, and you were helping a lot of people all around rather than just some big corporation.
And that was the important part of it. I really felt that I was helping somebody who was uninformed, had no idea what they're doing. They just volunteer serving in the community, trying to make the community better, and they just didn't know how to do it. And so, the more things I saw of them making these mistakes, the more I realized that, I'm not selling insurance. I'm helping them to get better, have to help them get better. The claims are limited. I didn't see as many claims. And now today, it's really, really become an issue because of all the things that we'll be talking about over the next, no matter how many of these podcasts we will be doing.
Yeah. Well, it is all about board members, and life is getting more and more complicated for board members just all across the country. There's more and more associations, there's more litigation, and there's more liability. There's certainly more pressures. Yeah.
Dysfunction.
It's more and more complicated. And maybe when real estate wasn't as expensive, it was as a big a deal. But now, continually, Americans are spending the most amount of money they spend on anything on their home. And it's becoming very precious.
Yeah. What about you? How long have you been in business?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that last night before I knew we were going to record today. I came at it from a personal side. I bought my first condominium and mortgaged up to here, of course, a young engineer working for an aerospace corporation in Los Angeles, and went to my first board meeting. I figured I should go because this all my money is in this condo. And at that meeting, it was just the board, the manager, and me. So I was just sitting there, and the president resigned, and everyone else looked at me and said, "Hey, do you want to be president?" And I said, "Sure. How hard could this be?" And that was my introduction to the world of community associations, where I realized that the reason I was able to afford that condominium was that it was 10% owner occupied. They had financial problems. It had just been converted from apartments. There was a lot of bumpiness in how things were going. And it really became something where I had to invest, time, talent, and energies. And because I had to have this association, this condo succeed. And so got involved. Make this long story short, it was right about then that I was working on the space program. Challenger program went down. The Challenger tragedy occurred. My job got very uninteresting. Our manager at the time was a very pretty young lady. Often a good story has a pretty girl in it or a young man. And she said, "Hey, you're doing some good things here. Can you help me with some budgeting that my other association clients have?" And what does a young man say when a pretty girl asks if he can help? You say, "Yeah, I'm in." So I started looking at budgeting and started helping her with other associations and started doing reserve studies. And that was the beginning for me. And it all kind of started with so many of the challenges being a board member, seeing what I was facing, knowing that there were other associations out there feeling the same way that I was feeling, knowing that I could help. And maybe that was a little bit of what tuned it in for me, just that engineer mindset where it was something I could fix. And then with that vested personal interest that this is my home and I had to get this place to succeed.
It's kind of what a coincidence, because we kind of both started big and looking at these big things that everybody, the job I had, everybody wanted. They wanted to handle the largest corporations in California. And I was handling them. I'm out with these board meetings and talked to the top people at Disney, talked to the top people at the hotel and all of a sudden I felt more at home helping these board members who really needed some help. I felt like it was something, and you're saying the same thing. And I also was a board member. In fact, we met 40 years ago where I was on the board of my condominium. I filled out a little card saying we had a reserve study, and I met you there because you ended up pulling our card out and doing a reserve study. So I met you probably in 84, 85.
Wait.
Condominium.
Old Vickery Square?
Old Vickery Square. That's what it was. Yes.
Yeah.
I was living there, and I was a board member, and I went through all the things a board member went through, and I said, this is not fair. You have board members who have one job to make sure that the place is a safe place to live where they can feel at home. And we got yelled and screamed at that first annual meeting. And I said, you know what? We need to do a better job. I need to learn how to effectively run a board and how to manage a board, how to enforce the documents, how to collect assessments, all those things I had to learn to do. And once I learned to do that, it made my job as a community association director and officer specialist so much easier.
Yeah. Well, for me, there was a little bit of that hard thing. You talked about the yelling. I don't remember that, but I do remember walking out of that first board meeting and the treasurer leaned over to me and said, Robert, we are having regular roof leaks and we don't have enough money to replace the roof. I was like, this is going to be a challenge. And then, so we need to pass that special assessment. And I remember going around with the other board members. We split up the association. We're knocking on doors and saying, we need the special assessment. It was going to be about $500 per door. And I turned on my salesman skills. I said, we can make this work. This is our home. It's going to be $500. We didn't put it in before. And I realized I like making this association better. And it was those kinds of things. And then the manager one day at a meeting said, we have this window that's leaking. What should I do? I was like, what do you mean? What should you do? Let's fix it. And just all those little decisions, big decisions, appreciating that every association that I now drove by, I realized they're facing these same things, and understanding the challenges and figuring out, okay, we got it figured out, and we got ourselves a special assessment. We got ourselves a reserve plan. So we were pointed in the right direction. I wanted to have that sense of, now that we've invented this wheel, let's make it a little bit easier for someone else.
And it's funny, that's interesting how what you said, inventing the wheel. 40 years ago, that's what happened. We had to invent how to solve these problems, because we had a problem with self-facing porches where the sun destroyed all the self-facing porches, and we had to reserve, and nobody knew what reserves were. Nobody knew any of this thing. And I faced the same dilemmas you faced. I had to learn how to do these things, what we had to do. And it was an education back then, because nobody knew the answer. There were no answers out there. So over the past 40-something years, we had to learn the answers and make sure that we taught other people so they didn't face the same challenges that we faced. Right now, they face more challenges today they never faced before, but we're more educated so we can help them just a little bit better.
Right. Going to industry events, going to trade shows, speaking to managers, speaking to roofers, speaking to insurance people, speaking to bankers, and putting this information together and realizing that, yeah, there are better ways to do this and harder ways to do this. And with the clients that we faced and the clients I'm sure you faced, you realizing there's some boards that they've got it together and they're running it very well. And there's some boards that are facing some challenges, human nature type challenges, people challenges, financial challenges. And you want to reach out and say, hey, if you just do a couple of things differently, life could be a lot smoother. And then it comes down to real estate values. Is your association thriving? Are the property values going up? You want it to be good for all the homeowners there, that the board member is not I don't want to say a waste of time, but just a struggle. I remember thinking, if I can make my unit 10% more valuable and multiply that by 71 different units, I've done a wonderful thing. So the time that I was spending being a board member, I was trying to leverage that in my mind, thinking that, okay, this is good for the association. And that ended up being a real important motivation for me. Am I making this a better association? Not just for me, but for all 71 other homeowners. That was a good feeling that I ended up anchoring.
And it's amazing that we see the number of associations out there will have a great association right next to it. You see all the issues where, deferred maintenance, not collecting assessments, not enforcing the documents, right next to each other. And it is about leadership. I mean, that's, if you want to talk about something, it goes to leadership and education. You got to have both of them together. Leadership without education and education without leadership doesn't work.
Yeah. Were you going to board meetings, or how many times were you interfacing with the actual board?
Well,
was it mostly paperwork?
Most of my work in terms of the board was me on Old Vickery Square. I learned most of that. Everything else I learned is from talking to other people, managers, insurance agents, people like you, and hearing their issues and going, guess what? We have things out there that we can help to make their life just a little bit easier.
Yeah. Well, I remember the same kind of thing, doing what I do, being on top of a roof and seeing this is a squared away property. I know it. I've got my fingers in their financials. I know the physical attributes of the building. And I could see a property across the street that we'd done a reserve study for a year or so ago. And I knew that property was a very challenged property. And I remember one time very specifically being at the top of the roof, I was taking a break, looking around and seeing a real estate agent bringing a couple in to that association across the street and thinking, not that one, turn around, this one. There are these unseen things. And I guess that's what drives us here. So Kevin, tell us, why are you investing time in this podcast? What's drawing you to this?
You know what? It's an opportunity for us to talk to the masses out there about things they need to do to make living in a community association just a little bit easier and better for them, especially today more so than ever before, because the challenges are becoming more and more and more. People living together have gotten more complicated, you know. You talk about things like COVID that we have to deal with. You talk about Surfside building came down. And you talk about this living together with people, and we're seeing things that we don't like. I mean, I see things in terms of every day I get applications for direct and also liability coverage. And I'm seeing things on the applications and seeing claims that I have never seen before. And so if I can accomplish one thing and say, watch out for this. Let me give you a perfect example of one thing. And this is a example for everybody out there. If you're talking about the number one issue facing not only community association, all of us in terms of crime activity, theft activity, something that we all can do something about by getting the word out right now, is we're seeing the positive forgery claims. Oh, positive forgery, meaning this: people right now are stealing these keys from the mailbox, from the post office people, taking checks out of them, whitewashing the checks, or calling up and getting their banking routing numbers, okay, and making lots and lots of money. The key thing is that we do not look at our bank statements. By not looking at our bank statements, they continuously take money out of our banking accounts. Yes,
Bleeding us.
they're bleeding us without us knowing it. And they are doing it. It's the biggest problem right now facing not only for community associations, but all of us. Because if you send checks out, they could easily get those checks and order checks because your bank and routing numbers are there, and we don't do anything about it. We don't look at our monthly, we don't reconcile our checking accounts. We just get our monthly statements, toss them aside, and we assume they're right doing the right job. That these kind of things that we learn when we start seeing, wait a minute, why are these managers saying the checks were forged? Why are these homeowners saying checks were forged? And it's interesting, and it's not, like some unit owners, it's more like the landscapers and it's like the service providers, because you don't write a lot of checks in community association anymore. But we see people in there stealing checks out of the mailbox. So that's kind of things that we see. And my job is to, on these podcasts, is to say, if I can leave you with one piece of information that makes running a community association better, then I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish.
Yeah. Well, there's so many things that start to spring to my mind when you're talking about that, and things that I can suggest maybe never used to worry about. You get a check, you send a check. And now we have to you talked about this being a more complicated situation where we're all living together. And it is more complicated. And as you said earlier, it's the board members are the backbone of this entire community association industry. And it was a call that you gave me, must have been August of 2021. So Champlain Towers South fell in June of 2021. And you called me on my cell and you said, Robert, we have to do something about this. And I'm in Los Angeles, you're in Los Angeles, and Florida is a long way across the country. And I was thinking, what have I missed? Is there my problem? And you said, no, it's all about Champlain Towers South. We need to do something about this. We can't take any more of this. And that phone call triggered a lot of thinking in my mind. And I started looking at the pictures of Champlain Towers South before the collapse, and seeing the pictures of their garage area with a lot of cracks in the supporting columns. And if you go online, you can see those pictures previously. And those were people that, just like checks in the mail, they were not worried about those things. They'd seen those cracks for years. And yet those were exactly the cracks that made the building weak, and it fell down. And all of a sudden I realized our entire industry is built on the heavy load that board members all across the country are carrying. And that's a little bit of a risky situation, that we're relying on board members in every one of these, 375,000 associations, making good decisions. And that's, we're relying on volunteers. We're relying on untrained, underappreciated, hardworking volunteers trying to get their spirits up for the next board meeting, get prepared. And I realized we have to do something about this, and I'm in. And my staff reminded me, or they looked into it, and they told me that there are more community association board members in this country, elected officials, than there are state, federal, and local elected officials. So there's more elected officials in the community association industry, the board members. So when we talk about the president, the governor, the city council, all that kind of stuff, there's more elected officials in community associations, and they're running these neighborhood associations, the condos that we all drive by, and no one is pouring into them. And Kevin, that phone call you gave, and again, I'm thinking it was August, started the wheels rolling in my brain that we need to do something to pour some energy and to affirm them, to encourage them, to inspire them, to motivate them, to prepare them for we'll take a one board meeting at a time. What, like you said, can I give you one piece of advice, one board meeting at a time to get you across that hurdle and get you better prepared for the next hurdle? Yeah, when you think about 2 million board members across the country, that's a heck of a population of boards. And boy, if we can draw that community together to help them share information with each other that we can, and then from our 40 years, the people you know, the people I know, we have a few guests, experts already lined up. We have some board members that have been doing some great things. We have them lined up to tell their story. We're going to spend some Q&A time. There's a lot of things we want to do here with this podcast, and it all stems from the hardworking board members that are the backbone of this entire industry.
That's it. You can't have said it any better than that, Robert. These board members, the 2 million board members out there, have a job to do, and they're not educated. They're not informed. They're not experienced. And then
they volunteer, or they get volunteered, like I did. And yes. What got you onto the board?
I didn't show up before a meeting.
They said that new guy.
The new guy. I've heard he writes insurance or something like that. Just make him an assistant something or another.
Yeah.
I was a board member, and
how much training did you have?
Zero.
Zero. Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's so many of the associations out there are just like that. And then, of course, now after, business owners and working in this industry for a long time, you're a salesman. You love speaking. I love educating. And now we have this technology where we can reach out and touch so many people. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah,
the joy that you get.
This is the key to the whole thing, is that I guess the best gift we ever got from COVID was having these conversations we have across the country. And we can educate, right, without having to get on the plane, without renting a car and spend the night in a hotel. Right now, Robert, what we're going to do, we're going to reach more people in this little podcast. And again, if we can leave just one piece of information for each board member to say, I understand, I get it now, how important this job is. Because again, historically, when I was a board member, we talked more about what was the movie, what was the book we were reading, who's bringing the snacks, than it was about maintaining a common area.
Right.
We just never talked about it. And today, I bet you any amount of money, they talk about, what Netflix show they watch, what's on Hulu, right? More so than they talk about what, maintaining the common area. It probably hasn't changed that much, even though they have more exposure than ever had before. Champlain Towers said, guess what, guys? You have a responsibility. You are responsible. 100 people died on that building collapse, and we as insurance professionals never imagined that we can lose. We knew a building could collapse or a roof can collapse and we can lose people, but not a whole building. And that's why I made that phone call to you, because I'm facing something I never faced before, and that's that potential, and once that potential happened, it was my job to say, this is more seriously than you thought, board members.
Yeah. And that one phone call where in the reserve state business, the worst that can happen was we recommended a special assessment. We recommended a assessment increase or a special assessment. We said, sorry, we have some bad news to deliver. You're a little bit behind on how much cash you should have on hand. Never thought about people dying. And all of a sudden, that became a consequence, a very real consequence, and made us appreciate that this is serious business. And we're in a position with the technology, with the 40 years that we've been in doing this. Julie Adamen's going to join us from a management point of view. her years, decades in the industry, all the guest experts we have at our disposal. I'm looking forward to one episode at a time. If we can get one board member ready for their next meeting with an additional tip or insight, or even just a little encouragement to prepare well, to stay on agenda, to know their priorities. That's kind of stuff I'm looking for, because you and I enjoy speaking. We've built our businesses, we know a lot, and now we have an opportunity to help potentially a lot of people all across the country. And I get a lot of pleasure out of that.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Again, it's about informing the masses so they can make better decisions. So what we saw happen, not only that will never happen again, but again, if people can live more peacefully in their community association without all the things that you and I have been seeing, because they failed to do something simple as maintain the common area, collect assessments, force the documents. Those are the three basic things they can do that make life a little bit better.
Yeah. Whether it's peacefulness, or I like to use the phrase safe and successful, pointing them to a safe and successful future. Ever since June of 2021, we needed to add that safe in there. This is a big time. Anyway, Kevin, a good time. Thanks for joining me here on this first episode number 1. And we look forward to everyone joining us for our next episode next week. Kevin, what do you think we talk about the number one challenge in our industry that keeps us up at night?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is, to me, the number one issue is life after COVID, post-COVID world for condominiums. We're seeing it. I'm seeing a lot of it. So I'm looking forward to really going into that a little bit at our next week or next time we're talking about it, because life has changed. COVID has changed all of our lives, made things a lot different, and looking forward to our next time together.
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, thank you very much. And to everyone who joined us, thank you very much. And we look forward to having you join us next week.
Thanks a lot, Robert.
You've been listening to Common Sense for Common Areas. If you like the show and would like to support us, you can do so in a number of ways. Subscribe to Common Sense for Common Areas wherever you find your favorite podcast, and please share it with another board member. Do us a huge favor by going to iTunes and leaving us a 5-star rating and review. You can also support us by supporting the brands that sponsor this program. You'll find links to the websites and social media for Association Insights and Marketplace, Association Reserves, Community Financials, and Kevin Davis Insurance Services in the show notes. But the most important thing you can do is to engage in the conversation. Connect with Robert Nordlund, Kevin Davis, and Julie Adamen on social media. Email your questions or voice memos to podcast@reservestudy.com, or call our 24/7 voicemail line at 805-203-3130. This podcast was mixed and mastered by Stokelight Video and Marketing. With Stokelight on your team, you'll reach more customers with marketing expertise that inspires action. See the show notes to connect with Stokelight. Finally, remember that the views and opinions expressed by the podcast do not constitute legal advice. Please consult your own legal counsel before making important decisions.